there, and welcome to the Transparently Jordan podcast, where I'll be talking with a new guest each week, and we'll be covering topics in health, fitness, lifestyle, and so much more. So stick around and let's get into today's episode.
Of course, we have our likes and dislikes, but we also grow up in a world where we are constantly fed representations of how men and women should look. And it shouldn't shock you that most people's preferences do in fact align with those representations. What that tells us is that our preferences are not necessarily natural or organic. They're socially conditioned, and that after repeated exposure to the same look again and again and again, this is the look that we come to like.
Hello there, and welcome to another week. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I had a great weekend. It has been crazy freaking hot here. It has been super tame summer here in South Australia, but the past few days have been like 35 degrees and it has been boiling, so I've spent a lot of the time at the beach just cooling off in the water, and the water's been super nice. It's been kind of warm and good kind of swimming temperature, so nice temperature to go cool off and then lay on the beach. And it's been so weird because this is, I think, my 5th week and final week off, but it feels like I'm on vacation, you know? Like, technically I am on vacation right now. Like, I don't have any schooling, but the whole reasoning for me like moving to Australia is to be in school. And I was just thinking about the entire year and how all year it's been so weird because I'm in school and I'm busy, but then there are still days of the week. Like, I remember last semester, Mondays, for example, I had Mondays off and I would go to the beach every single Monday, just kind of spend the entire day at the beach. Kind of like, you know, back when I was living in a place where there was no beaches. The times that I did go to the beach, it was kind of like when I went on vacation, you know, to wherever I went. So it just feels like I'm on vacation right now, which is such an amazing feeling. And I'm so lucky to be in a place where I can do that. But yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day, and that has been crazy to me. I have been doing actually pretty good. So let's maybe go into the weekly wrap now. Or the weekly wrap. I don't even know where I got that from, but my past week has been okay. I haven't done anything special. I went on another wine tour, which was pretty awesome. I went to a few cool and very beautiful wineries, and I purchased a bottle of wine, which is very unlike me. If you know me, you know that I rarely drink, and it was super unlike me to even buy a bottle of wine and have a bottle of wine, you know? It's something that I'm going to be drinking on my own at home. Maybe one day when I'm recording this podcast, I'll pour myself a glass of wine. I don't even have wine glasses, so I'll have to go and buy them first and drink it while I'm recording an episode. But that is what I did on one day. I've been to the beach. I have been exploring the city, just kind of getting to know the city a little bit more. But one thing that I've been doing and what I've been implementing the past 2 weeks since New Year's is every morning I am waking up and I am reading for 15 minutes and I am journaling, which has actually been super cool, and meditating in the morning. So I have a meditation app called Smiling Minds, and it is completely free. It has so many programs on there, and I've just been doing that. It's like between 5 to 10 minute meditation. I've been reading for 15 minutes and then journaling for like 5 minutes. So it's been every morning. It's been about 30 to 45 minutes of just kind of things for my mindset. And that is my New Year's resolution, is to do a whole bunch of crap for my mindset. And I shouldn't have said crap, but you know, it's not crap, but do a whole bunch of stuff for my mindset and just kind of stuff for my mental health and mental well-being. And I have noticed that I've just been a lot calmer in the mornings. I've been less stressed, and I am a strong believer that, you know, how you are in the morning kind of sets you up for the rest of the day. So that's kind of why I want to implement those things in the morning. One thing that I did that has made so much of a difference, and I've done it since January 1st, actually, um, is I deleted Grinder. I know you all are thinking, or if you are listening right now and you're straight, you don't have anything like Grinder. But all of you gays that are using Grinder, you know how toxic and how annoying and just, ugh, I can't even get the words out on how good I feel now that I am not on the app. It is such a toxic place. It is such a stupid place, to be honest. And since I deleted it, I have just been kind of amazing. I've been feeling amazing. I've been feeling good. And I've been checking my phone less. I've been, not anxious opening pictures on a phone. Like, it has just been so amazing. And I am definitely going to be making an episode in the future about this topic, about the toxic kind of environment that Grindr puts on us. So that is to come. It is going to be like a freaking X-rated episode. So if you are squeamish around sex and you are, I don't know, homophobic or whatever, that's not going to be an episode for you. Now, the one thing that has been on my mind the past while, actually, I think since the beginning of January, is freaking society, people. I know that is super deep, but essentially just the views that we put on various things and just what we are taught, and essentially what we are taught that's male versus female and this and that, for example. So essentially what happened, or what brought me to this kind of, I guess, I don't know, brought me to this mindset and this thought process for the past, I guess, 2 weeks now is I like to paint my nails. I've always liked to paint my nails. It's something that I have done for, I don't know, a couple years now. But I posted a picture on my Instagram about a week ago of I don't even remember what the picture was, but you could see my nails in it, and you could see this beautiful baby blue color. Like, honestly, it's my favorite color. I have been doing this color for the last couple weeks now. It's so pretty. But anyways, I posted this picture, and to me, painting my nails is just a thing. It's just something that I like to do. Nail polish to me is just a thing. It's something that you put on your nails. It doesn't, yes, females are kind of the gender that typically, historically, have been the ones to paint their nails. But the thing is, nail polish is just a thing. It's just something that you put on your nails. It's just a color that you make your nails. And to me, the whole concept of it being a girl thing or a girly thing is just so outrageous. And I posted this picture and I got some slack from posting that picture. And it was just amazing to me getting this slack because, again, it's just it's such a weird thing, that as we grow up, I should say, we are taught this is for boys, this is for girls. But, when we are younger and when we are first kids or children, toy is a toy. I remember being a kid, or actually, I don't remember being a kid. I remember watching videos of just me playing with toys. And when you're a kid, you don't have this whole concept of this toy is a boy's toy and this toy is a girl's toy. We are taught this is boys and this is girls through society and through the things that are purchased for us. I grew up with all of these, I guess, boy toys or toys that are made for little boys. And I'm doing those little quotation marks with my hands right now because what is a toy for a boy? What is a toy for a girl? Dolls, for example, are some things that we are made to believe at a young age are for little girls. But a doll is a doll. It is something that you put clothes on. It is something that you carry. It is something that you play with. there's no reasoning that it is a girl's toy. It's just something that as a society we have been told this is for little girls. So that's what we were made to thought. And that's essentially what I think of nail polish. I just think it's something that you put on your nails. I don't consider it a girly thing. Yes, a lot of females, again, put nail polish on, but there are more and more males now that are like, what the hell? No, I am going to put nail polish on. I am going to put makeup on because it is just a thing. It is a way for me to express myself. There are straight males out there wearing makeup. There are straight males out there wearing nail polish because it is just a thing. And people are trying to break the stigma. Harry Styles did this whole thing wearing dresses and wearing feminine products and products that are technically supposedly made for women. And it was like an outrage. People were posting videos of this, and Harry Styles is a straight male. He is wearing a dress, and it was just outraged. I saw so many TikToks making fun of him. I saw so many YouTube videos. In the media, there were just people bashing his masculinity and this and that. And actually, I think this is brought up in today's episode, actually, as well, the whole Harry Styles incident. So stay tuned for that. But I praised Harry Styles for doing that, for wearing a dress, for making this conversation that wearing a dress does not make you a girl. Wearing a dress, sorry, does not. It's not a huge deal like everybody made it seem to be. So that is just something that's been in my mind for a couple days now, a couple weeks maybe even since the beginning of January, since New Year's, because that's when I posted the picture. And it's just something that I think needs to be changed. I think it's a discussion that people need to continually have, and people need to be pushing the barriers like Harry Styles. If you want to wear a dress or if you want to paint your nails and post a picture on Instagram, go fucking do it, you know? It will cause a conversation. It will start a conversation, and hopefully change will come, you know? Hopefully in the future we do not see kind of these things as like a black and white painting. We do not see this is a boy's color, this is a girl's color, for example. That whole, when you are deciding or not deciding, you don't decide what baby you are, but when you're having a gender reveal, you have usually typically blue for a girl and pink, or blue for a girl, I'm getting that opposite, blue for a boy and pink for a girl. But if you think about it, a color, it's just a fucking color. We have made the colors, we have made pink to be representative of a girl and blue of a boy, when really it's just a thing. It's a color. It doesn't have a gender. Colors don't have genders. Nail polish doesn't have genders. These things don't have genders. It's just something that we as a society have made it to be. So, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that topic. It is just something that's been on my mind, and it's something that I just wanted to bring up because I think it's a good thing for people to be talking about, and it's a good thing for people to just be thinking about, figuring out how you can maybe change your thought process, how you can reflect, and how you can start conversations and start these kind of things. And that's maybe a good segue into today's episode, because we talk about some of this stuff, and my guest talks about some of this stuff in the episode. Now, it's no secret how much I love Miley Cyrus, but there's another artist that I am a super huge fan of, and I've only really started listening to his music the past year or so. And he has a brand new album out called Weird that I have gone out and I purchased, because if an album, sorry, is just so influential and so amazing in my opinion, I will go out, I will support the artist, and I will buy a physical copy. So I don't have a lot of physical copies because there are not a lot of artists that I feel that I want to support in that sense. But this artist, I felt that I wanted to support because of the message behind the album, because of what he stands for, and that is young blood, or his real name is Dominic. I don't know his last name, but Youngblood is an artist, a British artist, and he is a male who I don't know what he identifies as, straight maybe, but he's had girlfriends. I think he's had boyfriends. He just essentially is so open and honest about everything. He wears makeup, he wears nail polish, he wears the feminine, I'm using those quotation marks, or those girl clothes again, because he stands for equality and he wants to break the stigma. His new album, Weird, was so amazing. There were a few tracks on there that really got me thinking and that really kind of brought a whole bunch of emotions from my past. And it it was just such an amazing artist, and I am so happy that there are artists out there like Youngblood that create these albums and that have these huge platforms and are speaking for equality, like Harry Styles, and are creating these conversations and are wanting people to just stop I don't know how to say it, or stop trying to think things are not always the way that they seem, I should say, you know? Things, yeah, I can't really say it much better than that. Things are not always the way that they seem. We have been taught over and over, we have been shown over and over things, and we just kind of decide that's the norm. And there is no norm, essentially. Society has taught us and has shown us the same things over and over, like these boy slash girl things, and we have just kind of decided that is what they are. And artists like Youngblood have kind of just voiced their expression and their opinions that that is not right, and we should be who we want to be, and we should essentially just express ourselves however we want. So that is essentially my little tangent. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention Youngblood because I think he is doing some amazing things, and his music is great, his voice is great, and what he stands for is amazing. And it all fits in today's episode. So everything that I've just mentioned kind of, I think, is talked about in today's episode as well. So definitely stick around for today's episode. It is an episode that can be a little bit uncomfortable once again, but the uncomfortable things are the important things to talk about, I think. And if you are uneducated in kind of some of the stuff that essentially we talk about today, I mean, I know I am uneducated. I was uneducated in a lot of the things. I still am. And I am so happy that this guest has come on to kind of share his knowledge on some of these things, because it has really helped me as well, to be honest. Even though I am part of this community, I am naive and I like to kind of live in my cookie cutter world sometimes. So today's episode is covering essentially the same things. Well, I mean, not Grinder, but we're covering kind of taboo topics in a sense. You know, I like taboo and I like covering topics that are uncomfortable to talk about. And these topics, I shouldn't say exactly are taboo, but they are kind of uncomfortable for some people to talk about. And that is kind of the toxic environment in the LGBTQ plus community and in the gay community, essentially. So I am talking with someone who made a recent Instagram post about this, which caught my attention, and I reached out and I asked if he would like to be on the podcast and talk about this stuff, and thankfully he agreed. So this episode is kind of covering all of that and covering just the environment and kind of the bad things that go on in the gay community. So hope you all enjoy this episode. It is definitely for everybody. It is for gay, straight, lesbian, whatever or whoever you identify yourself as. This episode will be good listen. So hope you all enjoy it, and let's get into today's episode. Hello, everyone. I am sitting here with Jordan, which is going to get awkward or weird for me throughout the entire podcast, saying the exact or saying my name as well. How are you doing today, Jordan?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Now, Jordan, do you mind before we get started, just introducing yourself to all of the listeners?
Sure. So, my name is Jordan Foster, and I am a doctoral student at the University of Toronto.
Cool. Awesome. So now the reason why I wanted to get you on the podcast was because you made a post recently. I believe it was on Instagram that I saw it. The Reels function, the new Reels function that I still am not quite 100% sure how it works, but essentially you made a post about the gay community and issues that are often seen in the gay community and that people like myself see all the time. I'm sure everybody else in the gay community sees these issues. Do you mind maybe chatting just briefly about that post and kind of the post a little bit in more detail? I know it's a podcast, so we can't see the post. I would love to show it, but yeah, do you mind getting into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've done a couple of things all related to this, but it began with the post that you're talking about, which was a reel, which for those who are not familiar with Instagram, is a short video clip that's capped at about 30 seconds in length. And in that reel, I spoke to three issues that I thought were pervasive in the LGBTQ plus community. They were three of many issues, but they were three that came immediately to mind. And they are internalized homophobia, racism, and trans invisibility. I encouraged other users to add their own thoughts on issues that the community faces, and a lot of people did. And I actually followed up with a Instagram Live with my followers because they were really engaged with the topic and they had a lot to add. Many of them share lived experiences that are more complex, interesting, and insightful than my own. And so it was incredible to hear their stories. And I followed the live with another saved video, which is still up on my Instagram account, which speaks about body capital and embodied forms of privilege. And in that longer video, I had a chance to sort of talk about privilege and body capital in the LGBTQ plus community in a more comprehensive way. And I was encouraged to do that by a lot of followers online. And so far, the feedback on that, as well as the stories that people have shared, have been super cool. I should add, too, that it has received a fair bit of criticism at every point in this journey. It received criticism.
Like everybody does.
Yes. But I am happy with the message overall. And I am so encouraged by the things that people have shared online.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, the reason why I want to have you on the podcast was to chat a little bit more about all of those things, because they're things that I think anybody in the gay community or the community in general definitely sees. Even in other communities, people see similar things. So it's a very interesting topic, and it's not a topic that a lot of people talk about or a lot of people like to talk about. I think it's one of those topics that's uncomfortable, and the uncomfortable topics are the things that people should be talking about a little bit more, which is what I like to talk about. I like to talk about very uncomfortable things, hence why you're here. But maybe I was thinking like just 30 seconds ago, breaking those down a little bit more. So maybe starting with, just because it's fresh in my mind, the body privilege part of things. So when you're talking about body privilege and body capitalism, I believe, is what you said. What are you meaning by that? And what are kind of some examples maybe for people listening and not quite following?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm happy to talk about both of these things and how they relate to one another. I will try and do that in a way that is as accessible as possible. So in my disciplinary training, which is sociology, we talk a lot about the forms of capital. And these vary, but a really interesting form of capital is what some people call body capital. This is also called erotic or aesthetic capital. It depends on who it is that you're following. But they're really all very closely related. They're very similar. They're, in essence, a kind of symbolic capital that we recognize but struggle to sort of pinpoint. So when I say body capital, let's picture the most sort of conventional and ideal typical images of beauty and bodies that come to mind. And I think we all know what those look like. There's, of course, some variability, but where women are concerned, this is a slender and fit or taut body. There is perfect facial symmetry. And by and large, the women who we are sort of taught or told embody the most amount of body capital or privilege are white. Where men are concerned, the look is a little bit different. This is a masculine, sometimes hyper-masculine aesthetic, which is muscular, somewhat larger, and again, typically white. Now, again, there's variability in these representations, but those of us who embody the most kinds of privilege will sort of mirror very closely mainstream representations of these ideal typical bodies. So when I say that muscular men really embody this kind of privilege, I don't mean to say that as in terms of my opinion. I mean to say that everywhere we look, when we look at representations of beauty, whether that's in the mainstream media, in news reporting, in television shows, or even reality TV, this is what we see.
You see it in magazines, you see it on TV, like you say, you see it everywhere. And I think it creates also this issue of kind of body dysmorphia and all of these other things. I know for me, I've had body dysmorphia. I know I still probably do. I think everybody in some way at some point has some sort of body dysmorphia, especially when you're growing up as a teenager. But I think that's super interesting, especially the kind of the body capital part, or I like the word you said, erotic capital is another term, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I like that a lot better. I'm going to say erotic capital.
Okay. Yes. Erotic capital was coined by a scholar. His name is Adam Green, and he specifically explores erotic capital in what he called sexual fields. And he did this among a community of LGBTQ plus men. And so this is actually very appropriate given the other things that we're talking about today.
Okay, I'm going to say that because I like that term. It's a lot more fun.
Okay.
So, erotic capital. Now, it's an interesting thing that I wanted to talk about with you because you brought it up, and I think I did watch that. Was it like a 6 or 7 minute long video?
Yes.
The one that you're talking about? Yeah, so that's the one that I watched, I think. And it was super interesting because those are all things like, especially the body. When people in the not the muscular community, in the gay community look for other gay males, I think a lot of the ideal body that gay men kind of want is that muscular build or that slim build. And I think people who have that kind of builds are the ones that get a lot more of the attention in a sense. So I know, for example, when I'm flicking through Tinder, if you flick through Tinder and I see someone who, I mean, I know we're now getting into dating apps, which is, I'm going to steer off of this, everybody. Don't worry. I talk about this way too much. But when I'm flicking through Tinder, and if there is someone who is a little bit more, I guess, muscular, and you click yes to them, it's like, I get always this notification. Oh, this is someone who has so many likes. Do you want to super like this person? I'm like, I ain't paying money. No, first of all. And then you flick through people who may not have that ideal. And I'm using my fingers, everybody, to quote or use those quote things. If you don't have people who have that ideal body, those people don't pretty much get the attention. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing because body privilege, especially in the gay community, is a super prevalent thing. And I think it's a problematic thing. But I want to maybe ask you about social media. Do you see in your, I guess, studies or just in your opinion, does social media play a role in this kind of issue that we're discussing?
So I think social media, for me, unquestionably plays a role in worsening these issues. In my own research, so for those, again, who are just getting to know me here, I do research on embodied capital and embodied privilege, and I do look to social media as well as to other kinds of media to inform that research. And in my own research, and then also in my own use of these platforms, I think that unquestionably, there are certain men and women who receive more attention than others. And that's not only by algorithmic design, which is a separate topic for conversation, but it's also not surprising because these are the same men and women who we see valued all over the place, whether, again, that's television, fashion magazines. These are the bodies and individuals we've always been taught to privilege. So it's not surprising that on social media, so often we find that the most conventionally attractive, the most undeniably beautiful, amass followers very easily. They receive a great share of likes and comments, and of course, comments on their bodies. Now, I would never say that the experience from their perspective feels rewarding. It might not. But from our perspective, it certainly looks rewarding.
Right. And I like how you just said that from their perspective, it may not feel rewarding. I know on my Instagram, for example, I mean, okay, everybody, I ain't shit. Like my Instagram, I don't have a lot of followers or anything like that, but I post a lot of half naked pictures because I live in Australia. I'm at the beach all the time. And those pictures get way more likes and way more comments than the other pictures that I post. So, and that doesn't necessarily make you feel or make me feel more rewarded or anything anymore. In a way, it makes you feel a little bit more bad. And you're like, really? Why are you liking these pictures? But I'm posting a picture of my nice smoothie bowl the next day and I have like 0 likes on that. So I think that's a very interesting issue there because I think social media is becoming so big right now, and it's a thing that, I mean, everybody has social media. My grandma has social media. She follows me on Instagram. Like, it's something that everybody has, and it's becoming more and more of a problem. And there are documentaries on this. I don't remember which documentary I recently watched, but about this whole social media fiasco. So I thought that was a super interesting thing that you brought up, but I'm interested maybe moving on because I could spend hours on this social media topic alone and the body, but maybe moving on to internalized homophobia. What is internalized homophobia? And yeah, do you mind maybe get into that and kind of breaking that down for the listeners?
Yeah, of course. There is just one thing more that I'll say about social media before I
Oh
pivot,
yeah, for
because
sure. Go for it. I
like,
love it.
yeah, like you, I love the topic, so I could talk about it for a while. But just to your point about like the kinds of photographs that receive a lot of engagement on your Instagram, I think that that would be true also of mine. And I think, again, that's not surprising, right? Like social media has made the body more visible, perhaps, than it has been in recent history. And so the body, when it is the most visible, which is to say you have the most skin on display, these photographs tend to perform really well. And that tells us, I think, something about where we're at culturally. It should also raise questions for viewers about whether or not this kind of exposure and this ecosystem is healthy for us. I'm not in a position to answer that definitively one way or another, but I think it's healthy to think about. So now moving forward onto internalized homophobia. So internalized homophobia comes in many forms, but on a very basic level, this is what happens when gay men are taught to dislike themselves, and that over time, this message about how they should feel about themselves or about other gay men, it becomes internalized after repeated exposure. And so their actions, even though they might outwardly, suggest that they are very gay friendly, their actions inevitably tend to work against LGBTQ plus men and women. So the rejection of feminine gaze, for example, is a really useful illustration of the ways in which homophobia can become internalized and toxic.
That's a really good definition. Yeah, that's something that I think even I've experienced in the past, growing up, and I'm going to get personal now, y'all. So sit with it or get with it. Like I mention all the time, it's my podcast. So I'm going to get personal if I want to. But I think it's something, growing up, being someone who, let's say me, for example, I played ice hockey, I played lacrosse, and I did these things that normal, typical boys, I'm using those quotations again, usually do. And, being in the change room, being in the locker room, you get banter, you get kind of these comments all the time about gay people, about this and that. And I think from a young age, when you hear that over and over and over again growing up, you have this internalized homophobia a little bit. I know that I did. I think probably, I don't know when I got rid of it or when I started working on it, but it was something that I think I had. And I think a lot of people definitely experience. So it's a super interesting topic because it's something that you think, oh, if you're gay or other people that are maybe not in the gay community or not gay, probably think, oh, you're gay. You're probably for all of this. You're probably not against anything. But it's like, no, if you're experiencing these things for years and years and years, and you're having this weight on your back of kind of these things being pushed on you, then you're going to have this internalized anything. So I think that was super interesting there. And that was a great definition there. But for internalized homophobia, um, how is that issue solvable, do you think? I mean, this is probably going to be in your opinion, but does it, in your opinion, in your experience, maybe, how is that issue solvable for people?
Oh, that's a huge question.
Yeah,
I
I
can,
know.
I can try my best with you to let's see if together we can walk through some potential
For
solutions.
sure. Yeah.
It's so difficult because, as you sort of pointed out in the locker room example, internalized homophobia comes in really short and small slings and arrows, and it builds up until it's under your skin. And by then, most of us don't really notice what's going on, or we don't
Mhm.
question the way that we, think and feel. We just assume that that's natural. Um, in terms of challenging internalized homophobia, I guess open dialogue for me is the place to start. So that means allowing people to also talk about the things that they feel, whether that's attraction or a preference. Oftentimes we do see that word in the community, the preference for people. Well, I want to hear about that, and I want to hear about it so that we can talk about it and unpack everything that's underneath it. That might also mean dialogue about insecurities and anxieties. So what's really behind all of the feelings that people have, and oftentimes that's shame or guilt about their sexuality. Or it could be trauma because at a very young age they learned a certain lesson, and at this point it's very difficult to unlearn. So I think dialogue is the place to start. I think that as a more fun avenue too, like I do believe that for all the damage media can do, it can also do a great deal of good. And I think that media representations that challenge how we think about masculinity and sexuality and gender play a really important role in unearthing internalized homophobia. So I think most of us are familiar with Harry Styles' recent editorial for Vogue and his appearance in a dress. And while Harry Styles is not a gay man, his representation in this way got so many people talking from across the board. And that conversation, though often, incendiary and mean, can also do a lot of good. It can be very fruitful because it forces people to confront their internalized thoughts and feelings, and it puts it all out there in the open for us to address.
I really like that talk. So I think talking and having this dialogue is super important, and it can be done in so many ways. You can talk and you can do something like Harry Styles did and be bold and post a picture, or have a blog and share your story, or this and that. You can do that kind of things, or you can do things behind the scene. I know for me, I had a therapist for a little bit, and when I was in high school, I saw the counselor. When I was in college, I saw the counselor at college, and I think that for me really helped, and it really helped me reflect. So I think reflecting is also something that's super beneficial and super important. And I know I'm someone who always wants to be better. And I think I wasn't able to be better if I had this entire or this huge kind of weight on my back and this huge thing from my past. I could work on my mental health as much as I could, but unless I talked about this certain issue, I wasn't probably going to get anywhere. So I think talking um, is super important. And like I mentioned before, blogging. I think for me, that's what I did. I blogged and I just kind of wrote things out and got things out and spent hours sometimes just kind of writing this out. I think that really helped me. But I think first addressing this and just kind of reflecting is a way That can help. Maybe it can't. I'm not a psychology major. I have no freaking clue, but
Well,
um,
yeah, no, it's challenging, but change, especially cultural change, is slow and it's incremental. So it'll take time to do this. Therapy, as you said, is a wonderful example of the ways that, on an individual level, you can work to unearth and address these. And I mean, I think therapy is great for everybody, but yes, it's great for this issue as well.
in 2021, it is great for everybody, you guys. Um, but what are some other issues? I know you were mentioning a few other issues. I mean, there are so many issues in this kind of community, but what are some other issues that you mentioned maybe in the videos, and we can break those down a little bit more too.
Sure. Yeah. So we can talk about a couple different issues, and there are so many, as you said, and so many of my followers have added some that they feel are really important. So, ageism, for example, is an issue. Racism is a huge issue. Fat phobia is an issue. Trans invisibility is an issue. Toxic masculinity is an issue. So those are just a handful. And they're not exclusive to the LGBTQ plus community. I think anyone who's listening will know that a lot of these issues actually touch our sort of broader social world. They affect most men and women, but it's can be more complex in our community. Our community is also really, I think, well equipped to talk about these issues because historically we've dealt with issues of nonconformity. So I mean, I'm always eager to talk to people about in the LGBTQ plus community about their thoughts on these issues. And I named a few. We can talk about whatever you like, Jordan.
Well, I think it's also an issue because that kind of sparked an interest in me because I think also sometimes people in the community, I know me, like I was always forced to be quiet and not to speak about it or not to come out of the closet or not to tell family or this and that. So I think it's also an issue in that sense because historically or, growing up and not depending on what family you live in or how you're brought up, but sometimes people are told, okay, this needs to be quiet, you need to be quiet. And I think that kind of, I know now me, I think a lot of the reason why I'm so loud-mouthed all the time was because I was forced to be quiet for so long, and now I'm like, fuck it, I don't care. um but maybe getting into I know the first or one of the first things that you said was ageism. And I think that's a super big thing. I see that all the time. People that are older, for example, getting discriminated at the bars and people just treating them like complete garbage. So what maybe is ageism and how is that maybe an issue in the gay community? Because I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I know a lot of you listeners are not gay. Um, so just for all of those people listening, how is ageism kind of an issue?
Ageism is a huge issue in the LGBTQ plus community. Generally speaking, and perhaps not surprisingly, youth is really widely prized. A youthful appearance, that doesn't necessarily mean a youthful age, but a youthful appearance is widely prized. And you can see this. Yeah, if you go out to a bar or a club, you will see this in action. You will see that the most young and fit physiques are going to be served first. They get the most attention in the club or bar, which is fairly similar to what happens on social media. And of course, they have dance partners and people who want to talk to them, and they're perceived as more sociable and likable, and all of these things. And some of that is just my anecdotal experience, but I can also tell you that most research bears out that those who are young and objectively attractive tend to be rated as more sociable, they tend to be rated as more likable, etc. So the research does bear quite a bit of this out, which is interesting to think about for those who might feel a little bit of resistance as we talk about this. Age, of course, also works against gay men, and to a great extent, straight women will know this very well, right? Age is a resource that depletes very quickly, and this is true also for gay men. And so for older men in the community, I think that there is this feeling of invisibility and intense insecurity because they may have once experienced what it meant to feel attractive and wanted and desired. And then you sort of age out of that and the attention fades. And I think perhaps more damaging for our community is that we tend to eroticize age. So we have the zaddy and the daddy, and they are of a certain age, but they also are of a certain look. And that gets very narrow, right? Like the kind of guy who we might call a daddy, who is erotically interesting and
Could be
older.
like a 28-year-old.
Yeah, yeah, and if he is older, it's likely he is just impossibly attractive, and that's a
Hmm.
very difficult expectation or body ideal for people to actually meet, right? It excludes most people because so few of us can actually age in this perfect and fabulous way.
That, yeah, that's super interesting. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, when we call people daddy, it could be like a 30-year-old who is just a little bit older, but huh, that's super interesting. Yeah, I think it's an issue as well, like you mentioned, for all of the reasons. And I think the industries now, especially let's say the beauty industry, a lot more males, not even gay males, but straight males are working on their appearance, are buying all of these skin creams, these night creams, this and that to kind of have this younger complexion to try and stop aging, for example. Because as a society, I think not even in the gay community and the straight community, people are looking for that man that has that younger appearance, has that youthful appearance, has that attractive, or whatever that means, attractive appearance. And those are the people in the clubs, when you go to the bars, get the most attention. I know when I go to a bar, even if I go to the straight bar with all of my friends, all of the guys that are single and that are or have that attractive, I guess, quality to them are the ones that get all of the girls that talk to them and are the ones that get chatted to. So I think that's a interesting thing, and I don't know why it is. I don't know. This is something that I'm not going to ask. How do we change that? Because that's a very big loaded question.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. If
but
you
uh,
sorry, Jordan, if you want
yeah,
though,
no, no.
I think a really cool avenue to discuss, and only if you'd like to, but it's
Oh, go for
certainly
it.
something I've been thinking about a lot, is how, speaking of social media, TikTok plays a role in this
Ah,
discussion. And I say that because TikTok is a platform undeniably favored by a demographic under the age of 26. In
mm-hmm.
fact, there are TikTok trends that, make a joke about, if you were born in the late 90s, you're too old for this platform. That's
Yeah.
really interesting because, of course, there are lots of gay men on TikTok. There are lots of men on TikTok. And
Yeah.
it is a platform, never mind our real world, it's an entire platform dedicated to youth and youth culture, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that I never even thought about that. I mean, I always knew TikTok was for young, or majority of the people on TikTok were younger people, but yeah, that's a super interesting thing. And I think TikTok is a great thing. I mean, I scroll through TikTok and I see a lot of the dances and I see a lot of the stupid crap, but you do see some cool posts and some educational posts every now and then. So I think if you wanted to target that younger demographic or that younger population, then yes, TikTok would be a super easy thing. Even Instagram Reels. I know Instagram Reels is new and it seems like it's similar to TikTok. So, I mean, I'm just assuming, but I'm assuming a lot of younger people are on the Instagram Reels function. So, if you're primarily on Instagram Reels and you want to have a conversation, then use that function.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they both have so much potential. You're right. There's a lot of great stuff on TikTok. There's stuff I don't love, but there's a lot of great stuff on TikTok.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Jordan, what are some other issues that maybe you have the most knowledge in and that you really want to chat about today?
Hmm.
Because there are a lot, there are a
Yeah.
lot, and we could spend hours, I guess,
Hmm.
talking about all of them. But what is another issue that maybe in your video got brought up a lot?
I think honestly, it would be race and how we relate to masculinity, which sounds funny
Mm,
because as
okay.
gay men, I think men is there, right? It's implied and it's explicit. But I think that these two things, race and masculinity, are really important to talk about. Race, because the community often discusses, as I said earlier, this preference, this racial preference, which people say is, natural and organic, and often pushing back on that is very controversial, and it shouldn't be. I was having this dialogue with a follower, and all I wanted was for him to consider that maybe this preference, which seemed very natural for him, was also socially situated. And what I mean by that is that, of course, we have our likes and dislikes, but we also grow up in a world where we are constantly fed representations of how men and women should look. And it shouldn't shock you that most people's preferences do, in fact, align with those representations. What that tells us is that our preferences are not necessarily natural or organic. They're socially conditioned. And that after repeated exposure to the same look again and again and again, this is the look that we come to like. So that was something that I really want, or something I really want to talk about more on my own platform. I think it's going to take time because it's to fully understand what that means for people in a way that doesn't sound accusatory, in a way that is open, is a little bit challenging. But I think race is something we really need to talk about because in our community, as in other communities, I think whiteness remains very widely prized. And then in terms of masculinity, I think that the community continues to have some real issues with toxic masculinity. That's, I think, going to be more familiar to audiences. In sociology, we would call this toxic masculinity hegemonic masculinity, which is this very narrow kind of masculinity that rejects all that is feminine or perceived as feminine. It tends to be a very muscular, non-feeling man who, of course, is very tall and very big and aggressive and domineering. And I think that this is a masculinity that is still very celebrated in our community. And it's a shame because it's a kind of masculinity that excludes the majority of men. That, and it also encourages most men to reject really important elements of themselves, including things like their feelings, their emotions, their relationships with other men. I think that that's a really important issue that's left to address as well.
Cool. All right. So going back to race, I think that's a super big issue as well. I think, like you said, the white male is still the ideal type of race, I would assume. And I know for me that it seems true, growing up for me, watching all the Disney movies and seeing these blonde haired, blue eyed males. I know that is sometimes, or not sometimes, a lot of the times, the type of male that I gravitate towards a lot of the time. So it definitely is something that I think if you're repeatedly fed over and over and over again through media, through social media, through this and that, you have these type of males on social media, let's say, and you have the blonde haired, blue eye guy on social media. They probably have millions of followers. And that's just because that's what people are fed and that's what people are gravitated towards. So I know on my Instagram, those are the type of people that always pop up on my suggested type of things because I mean, the algorithm and all of that, they know that those are the people that constantly probably get liked and the people that I'm looking at. So not even that, but not even males, I should say, females too. I think that type of female is the type of female that always kind of gets the attention and is something that is super big of an issue. And yeah, that's very interesting there to me. Now, with racism or with this type of ideal, how do you see that changing in the future? Another loaded question, but I like loaded questions.
No, I think that that's a wonderful question. And it's I think it's a perfect moment to ask this question because fortunately, there is a lot of change taking place with respect to representations, diversity, racial inclusion, and so on. And I'm so encouraged by that. And I think we see that in mainstream representations of beauty, in athletic representations. We're seeing it online as platforms shift to shed a light on really wonderful content creators who have been neglected for way too long because of the color of their skin. So I am encouraged. I think that change is already underway. I think that so much of this is in debt to the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement over the summer. But this also provides a window into what's needed to keep this kind of change in action. So a lot of the time when we see, say, brands or advertisers making a gesture toward diversity, that gesture tends to be short-lived. So they might include one Black man
I was
or
just thinking
woman,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and put them
Hmm.
on the cover or on an advertisement, or they'll sell a product, and then the brand is finished. Um, and this, of course, brands receive a lot of praise when they do include diversity and inclusion, but when it's short-lived, we have a problem. So it's important that our interest in diversity is sustained. And where race is concerned, we really need people to continue to push for greater representation. We need to continue to shed a light on not just Black content creators, but Black owned businesses, Black entrepreneurs, and all that surrounds this issue, right? Race is a huge issue that touches so many parts of our world. But we need people to continue to push for greater representation and inclusion in our community and outside of it.
I really like that. Yeah, because it is something that, when the Black Lives Matter movement first occurred, it was a great movement. But my initial worry was, okay, this is going to last maybe 2 months. All of these companies are going to make these posts and this and that, and then nothing. They're just going to forget it. And I think to this date, there are very few companies that have stuck with it and that still post the Black models and still have this little bit more exclusion in that sense. There are very few companies, especially here in Australia, with predominantly a lot of the models that you see on the clothing Instagram pages or in stores are white, the blonde hair, blue eyed type of surfer male. So that was, again, an issue that I thought was going to be an issue, I guess, in the beginning. And it's something that we need to still be talking about. I really like that point there. And it's something that we just can't be quiet about because it's super easy to just forget, especially in 2021. People move on like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but where can people go, Jordan, do you think, to educate themselves a little bit more on all of these issues and start discussions? Because it's great to start discussions and it's great to have these discussions, but how can people go about it and how can people kind of educate themselves on these issues? Because there are so many issues anywhere with any community, but especially in this community. So how can people educate themselves a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. That's a really great question. And it's something, Jordan, that I'm still learning about and that I endeavor to continue to learn about. So one option, let me see if I can organize my thoughts on this. So
Yeah.
of course, an option that I find very appealing because I love to read is to read about this.
Mhm.
I always, I always say to followers who ask me, I want to talk about some of these things, but I'm uncomfortable, or I don't know
Mhm.
enough, or I'm scared that someone will say something to me. I'd, I would invite you to read as much as you can about the issue, become informed, whether that's through looking at a newspaper or going to a university website to try and engage with more critical scholarship on an issue. That could be race, it could be gender, it could be sexuality. So that's one way to do it, is to read up on the issue so that you feel more informed. Knowledge is power. And that will give you I think a stronger opportunity to then dialogue. Now, alternatively, if reading isn't your thing, and that's totally cool, ask questions. To followers who write to me and say, I'm super uncomfortable about talking about, privilege, for example. Well, then ask questions. Start there. Ask questions about the things that you're curious about and let people know where you're at. It's okay to say, I don't know a lot about this issue. I'm sorry that I don't, but I don't. And I'd like to talk about it because I'm nonetheless concerned or interested, or I'd like to make a difference. Now, this doesn't mean you should be leaning exclusively on your friends who have, because of their lived experiences, suffered the slings and arrows. You should not be going to your one friend who is a friend of color and saying, tell me all about the experience. I think a lot of, I know I heard from a lot of men and women of color in the beginning of the BLM movement, for example, who were fatigued because they didn't want to have this discussion with their friends anymore. They didn't want to be the one window into the Black experience. Um, so when it is that you're asking questions and you're looking for dialogue, I guess try and be careful and conscientious about who it is you reach out to, because for some members of our community and other communities, these topics are sensitive, and it isn't always fair to go to one person as your voice. So what have we covered so far? We've done, you can read up on this, you can ask questions, engage with dialogue. How about some actionable steps? So you can also do things like supporting local businesses or reaching out to local community centers to inform yourself about resources, businesses, opportunities, and so on that favor men and women who are marginalized. So that might be non-white men and women or men and women of color. It might also be individuals who represent other kinds of marginality. So that could be, who are low income and in need of support in our community. It could be a support group for the elderly. So that's an actionable step that you can do, is look to your community resources to try and make a difference.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, those were all great points there. Especially the one, asking questions. I think if people are out there and they don't especially like to do the research, or they don't like to read, if you're lazy like me and I do not like to read at all, ask questions and find the resources that
Yeah.
are easiest for you. I know for me, it's YouTube, it's videos, it's Instagram, or social media. And there are some great sources that you can find. You do have to do some research though, and you kind of have to weed out the not so good sources. So I do recommend maybe doing that. And I know I am the laziest person in the world. So if I can do it, then you can do it, y'all. So definitely, I think educate yourself by whatever means helps you get a little bit more, I guess, in verse with the topics. I'm someone who is very naive and I do not know what the hell is going on ever anywhere. So it's an important thing to know, and it's an important thing to be educated on various things like this. So definitely educate yourself. Now, Jordan, where can people find you, and where can people chat with you more about these things if they wanted to?
I am mostly on Instagram. So I think that would be the place to direct people. I'm at the River Jordan. It's TheRiverJordyn. So you can find me there. I reply to most messages I receive, and I read all of them. So feel free to shoot me a message if you want to talk further, or if you heard something today that you're curious about, or if you have something that you think I should know about, because I'm always looking to learn and grow. So I'm also curious to just hear from people if they would like to reach out.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Yeah, this was awesome.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a very cool conversation, and I'm so grateful that you wanted to have it.
All right, everyone. Now, be sure to check out Jordan's Instagram and social media. I have included all of the links in the show notes, so check out all of that. You can follow him, and you can go and check out the reel and the various videos that he has made on these topics. I thank you all for listening, and this was a super good episode. It was super insightful. I am glad that Jordan came on to the show today to talk about these things, because, again, these are topics that are super prevalent in the gay community, for example, and these are issues that are super big in the community, but not a lot of people talk about them because people are uncomfortable talking about them. I know myself, I am not as educated as I should be in any of these. So that is why I want to have someone like Jordan come in and talk about these things, so that he could not only educate others, but myself as well, a little bit more. So I am super grateful that he came on the podcast, because, again, these topics are uncomfortable, but I find that the uncomfortable topics are often the topics that need to be talked about a little bit more. They're topics that, as a society, we have been taught to hold back and to not talk about and to be hush hush about. But it's like, why should we? You know, topics like sex, topics like these issues. I mean, sex isn't an issue, but that's just an example of a topic that we're told to not talk about because it's taboo and because you're a slut if you talk about it, you know? So that is super interesting to me. And like a lot of my episodes, you know, I like to cover a lot of those taboo, non talked about topics. I like to talk about topics that are okay to talk about as well. You know, that is what you get with this podcast. I am super grateful that I have had guests come on in the past, like Jordan, that have been willing to talk about the more uncomfortable topics, the topics that we're told not to talk about and to be hush hush about. And I have a lot of episodes planned in the future for a lot more uncomfortable topics. So, thank you all for listening to this week's episode, and I hope you all tune in to the future and tune in to the future episodes. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to the show. It really helps out the show. It just kind of keeps you up to date with all new episodes. It keeps you up to date with various things. You know, there may be episodes that you're not interested in, and that's totally okay, but those are the episodes that you can just skip over. But there may be episodes, like today's episode, for example, that are a little bit more interesting maybe to you. So those are the episodes that you can listen to. The other ones you can delete if you're not interested in. Now, I thank you all for listening to this week's episode or this week's podcast or however you say it. And I will talk to you all next week.